Now part of the Darkcast network. Welcome to Indie Podcasts with a dark side.
It started with a welfare check. In December 2018, Effingham County deputies went out to a property in Guyton, Georgia, after a neighbor called and said they were worried about a 14-year-old girl named Mary Crocker. The neighbor told officers they hadn't seen Mary outside in a while and were concerned about her well-being. Effingham County deputies went out to the Crocker family's mobile home, and when they got there, they didn't find Mary. They also couldn't find her older brother, 14-year-old Elwyn Crocker Jr., known as JR. Neither child had ever been reported missing. When police started asking questions, their father, 49-year-old Elwyn Crocker Sr., told them the kids weren't there because they had gone to live with their biological mother. However, that story started to fall apart pretty quickly. The more deputies pushed, the more their attention shifted to the property itself. Elwyn eventually led investigators to the backyard. There, behind the family's mobile home in rural Effingham County, they found a shallow grave. Then another. Buried in the yard were the remains of two teenagers.
Welcome to Love and Murder, Heartbreak to Homicide. We are Kai's AI hosts here filling in while Kai is off for the month of December. She researched and wrote every episode and will be back to hosting in January. But if you want a little more Kai while she's away, she dropped some raw Kai rants in the Patreon last week, patreon.com/loveandmurder. One rant was about a man who hid in the trunk of a self-driving taxi, and an upcoming rant about a teacher who was inappropriate with her 11-year-old student. This case made Kai very sick to her stomach and angry. The only way to get these raw rants is by joining the Patreon, patreon.com/loveandmurder. As a part of the Lamb fam, you get exclusive bonus episodes, case extras, ad-free and intro-free episodes, and more. Patreon.com/loveandmurder. Now grab your glass of apple juice and let's get back to this case of love and murder.
When deputies went inside the home, they found an 11-year-old boy with cerebral palsy and muscular dystrophy. He was removed from the house and taken into state care. There were also 5 other people living in the house. Elwyn, he'd worked as a Walmart Santa Claus in the past, so people in the area recognized his face from photos. His wife and the children's stepmother, 33-year-old Candace Crocker. There was also Kim, the children's step-grandmother and Candace's mother. Kim's adult son Mark, the kid's uncle, was part of the picture. And finally, there was Roy, Kim's boyfriend. From the outside, it looked like a big blended family sharing a mobile home in a small Georgia farming community, but investigators were able to dig up documents showing that in 2012 and 2013, the Georgia Child Services had already been involved with the family. Those earlier interventions came after allegations that Elwyn Jr. was being abused. As part of that process, the family was ordered to undergo mandatory counseling. During those sessions, counselors described Elwyn Sr. as an apathetic father. He reportedly told them that his obligation as a parent was just to feed, clothe, and give shelter to his kids. Nothing more than that. At the same time, there were specific reports about how the adults who around these kids were treating them. In 2012, one of JR's classmates told a school counselor they had seen Kim whip JR with a belt for more than an hour. That report is what helped trigger the involvement of Child Services and the mandatory counseling in 2012 and 2013. In June 2012, Mark allegedly beat JR. So to recap, you have an uncle physically assaulting a child, a grandmother figure whipping him so badly classmates are noticing, and a father who's straight up telling professionals he only sees his kids as people to be housed and fed at the bare minimum. Even after that intervention, the abuse didn't stop. And on top of all of that, when investigators later searched Mark's phone, they found that he had been looking up incest pornography. Despite everything, the children stayed in that environment. As JR and Mary got older, they both started disappearing from public view. They each completed 6th grade, and then they were pulled out of school with the claim that they would be homeschooled. That homeschool label meant teachers and other mandatory reporters no longer saw them day to day. By October 2016 and November 2016, there were allegations that Elwyn Jr. was being beaten, starved, and kept in a dog crate. November 2016 was the last time anyone outside the home saw him alive. 2 years later, in October 2018, Mary disappeared from public view as well, and her abuse was reportedly especially extreme. It was revealed that she was frequently zip-tied, kept naked in a dog crate, and beaten for trying to eat. Images pulled from the family's devices reportedly showed Mary looking emaciated, her hair cut off, and her body visibly deteriorated. Neighbors noticed that when they saw her outside, she never seemed to be playing like other kids. They said she spent hours doing yard work, raking leaves over and over, instead of playing with other kids in the neighborhood. October 2018 was also the last time anyone had seen Mary alive. On devices linked to the home, investigators found internet searches like what happens if a child ingests bleach and how to bury a dog in the yard. Those searches were tied to accounts associated with Elwyn Sr. A forensic pathologist, Dr. Edmund Donoghue, examined Mary's remains and calculated that Mary's body mass index was 8.6, which is drastically underweight. He said he had never seen such a low number. Her actual weight was below first percentile, and his conclusion was that she died of starvation. On October 27, 2018, at 5:33 p.m., while Mary's body was being buried just inside the wood line behind the mobile home, texts were going back and forth between the adults. Elwyn Sr. sent a message to Kim while he was in the middle of burying Mary. He texted,
"Almost done burying Mary's body," or "almost done burying Mary's."
Kim's reply came back quickly and without any sign of concern. She wrote,
"Cool. How deep?"
As he continued working in the yard, Elwyn Sr. got nervous when a car went by. He texted Kim again, saying,
"There was a car driving by very slowly. I think it was a cop."
He was worried about being seen, not about what he had just done. Around that same time, Elwyn texted Candace about Mary's condition and said,
"I think she's been hit in the head too many times."
After Mary was in the ground, just inside the tree line of the property, Elwyn and Kim allegedly talked about going to the movies. Elwyn Jr.'s body was already buried by then. His remains were skeletal when they were found, so his exact cause of death couldn't be determined. Even so, both deaths were officially ruled homicides. After the arrests in December 2018, the legal process started moving, but it moved in layers. By March 2019, 5 adults were charged in connection with Mary and JR's deaths: Elwyn, Kim, Mark, Candace, and Roy. All 5 pleaded not guilty, and the state made it clear early on that this wasn't going to be treated like anything other than what it was: 2 homicides involving years of torture and abuse. The severity of the allegations meant that Elwyn, Kim, and Mark all faced the possibility of the death penalty. From that point on, the case split along different tracks. The first 2 people to break were Candace and Roy. Prosecutors laid out a mountain of evidence against all 5 defendants, but these 2 were the first to decide there was no path out. In 2020, both of them pleaded guilty to murder. They each received life in prison without the possibility of parole. Even though Roy took a plea, he's still awaiting final sentencing, but his outcome is already locked in: life with no chance of leaving prison. Mark was next. Out of everyone involved, his role was laid out pretty clearly. The state, led by District Attorney Robert Busby and Prosecutor Matthew Breedham, built their case around several key pillars: years of documented abuse, medical proof of starvation and repeated physical torture, and the horrendous digital trail showing how the adults planned, discussed, and concealed Mary's death. During pre-trial hearings, specifically one held earlier in 2025, prosecutors walked the court through the text messages exchanged while Mary was being buried. Those messages were central to the state's argument that this wasn't an accident or a moment of panic, and it was carried out without even a flicker of remorse. The judge and everyone else in the courtroom heard the messages read aloud.
Almost done burying Mary's body.
Cool. How deep?
Hearing it spoken out loud was reportedly worse than reading it, and prosecutors highlighted how casual Kim sounded. They talked about Mary as though she was an object to get rid of, not a child whose life had been tortured away. The forensic testimony from Dr. Donoghue was another major piece of the state's case. He explained that Mary's bones, the photographs taken before her death, and the zip tie marks all fit the same pattern: long-term starvation and systematic torture. He testified that Mary didn't die quickly. Starvation is a slow, painful, and deliberate type of death. The prosecution argued that Mary's physical state proved she suffered extreme cruelty over a long period of time. When it came to Elwyn Jr., prosecutors argued that his disappearance in 2016 matched the timeline of documented abuse months earlier, and the digital searches found on the family's devices also lined up with the time frame of his death. The entire case was described as cruelty layered over secrecy, and secrecy layered over years of neglect and violence. With all of that evidence on the table, Mark became the next defendant to fold. On August 29, 2025, Mark pleaded guilty with a plea deal in place. His plea deal covered second-degree murder, cruelty to children in the first degree, cruelty to children in the second degree, 2 counts of concealing the death of another, and false imprisonment. In exchange for the plea, the state dropped his original malice murder charge and downgraded one of his child cruelty charges. The biggest thing the plea took off the table was the death penalty. Mark now faces 10 to 80 years in prison. His sentencing was scheduled for October 2025, and prosecutors were already preparing to push for as much time as possible. On November 12, 2025, Mark's sentencing hearing started. His defense team argued for the minimum sentence of 10 years, presenting character witnesses who described him as the cool uncle who provided gifts for the children. His aunt, Joanne Groover, testified that family members would be supportive of him upon his release. Prosecutors then detailed the horrific abuse, noting that Mark admitted to confining and starving Mary, leading to her death, and that his DNA was found on a speaker wire used to beat Mary. Superior Court Judge Matthew Hube rejected the defense arguments, emphasizing Mark's betrayal. "You did not protect Mary Crocker. You participated in torture and death." The judge also asked, if these children, particularly Mary, could speak from the grave, imagine what they would say. "Uncle Tony, why did you do this to us?" On November 17th, Judge Hube sentenced Mark Wright to the maximum sentence of 80 years in prison. The 80-year sentence was comprised of consecutive sentences: 30 years for second-degree murder, 20 years for cruelty to children, and 10 years each for concealing deaths and false imprisonment. On September 17, 2025, Kim entered a negotiated guilty plea. The terms of her negotiated plea included pleading guilty to 2 counts of malice murder, 2 counts of aggravated sexual battery, 2 counts of cruelty to children in the first degree, 2 counts of concealing the death of another, and 2 counts of false imprisonment. The felony murder counts against her were merged with the malice murder charges. As a result of this plea agreement, Kim was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. This negotiated plea also successfully took the death penalty off the table, an option prosecutors had previously been pursuing against her. So now Elwyn is the only remaining defendant who has pleaded not guilty and is awaiting trial. Prosecutors say that Elwyn bears primary responsibility for the prolonged abuse and deaths of both children. He is still facing the possibility of the death penalty.
Cases like this usually end with plea deals right before jury selection, especially when the state is prepared to show years of abuse, medical testimony, and graphic digital evidence to 12 jurors.
This is a case that still leaves people stunned, even years after the bodies were found. Not just because 2 children were killed, but because their deaths went unnoticed by everyone except the people responsible. The children weren't found because a family member reported them missing. They weren't found because a family member demanded answers. They were found because a neighbor asked police to check on Mary, and the truth unraveled from there. By the time the case is fully resolved, it will have spanned well over a decade, from the early abuse reports in 2012 to the disappearances between 2016 and 2018, to the burial, the discovery in 2018, the indictments in 2019, the early pleas in 2020, and now still waiting for the trial or final plea deal in 2025. And through all of this, one line from this case remains burned into people's minds. Cool, how deep? Those 3 words captured exactly why prosecutors are calling this one of the most shocking child murder cases Georgia has ever seen.
And that's where we're going to leave this case for now. We'd really like to know what you think, so take a moment and share your thoughts with us in the comments below or over in the Patreon. These conversations matter. Patreon.com/loveandmurder.
If you want to support the show and help us continue telling these stories with the victims at the center, you can join us on Patreon at patreon.com/loveandmurder. It's how this podcast stays listener-funded, and it's where you'll find bonus episodes, extra case discussions, and Kai's raw, unfiltered rants while she's away. Patreon.com/loveandmurder. Thank you for listening all the way through, and thank you for supporting Lamb. Also, don't forget that it's all love and no murder, and we'll see you in the next episode.